Hello, and welcome back to The Hidden Fact. In today's video, I will tell you about international humanitarian law. So before going to start the lecture, please make sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel and click the bell icon. And today our topic of discussion is international humanitarian law, so we will cover the following points. What is international humanitarian law? Where did international humanitarian law originate? Where is international humanitarian law to be found? When does international humanitarian law apply? What does international humanitarian law cover? What restrictions are there on weapons and tactics? Is international humanitarian law actually complied with? What should be done to implement the law? So will we discuss the first part of our topic, that what is international humanitarian law? International humanitarian law is a branch of public international law. And now, what is public international law? Public international law is an international law that regulates the relationship between two sovereign states. So basically, international humanitarian law regulates the conduct of various countries during the war, or you can say armed conflicts. So this means international law is only applicable during the war. Now let's talk about its origin. There was no concept of international humanitarian law before 1859. At that, people think that there should be some proper rules to fight the war and to give proper nursing to the victims of the war. At the end of 1864, a convention was organized on an international level which is known as Vienna Convention, where 12 countries participated from all over the world. And as the international community has grown, an increasing number of states have contributed to the development of those rules. International humanitarian law forms today a universal body of law. Where is international humanitarian law to be found? A major part of international humanitarian law is contained in the 4 Geneva Conventions of 1949. Nearly every state in the world has agreed to be bound by them. The conventions have been developed and supplemented by 2 further agreements. The additional protocols of 1977 relating to the protection of victims of armed conflicts. Other agreements prohibit the use of certain weapons and military tactics and protect certain categories of people and goods. The 1954 Convention for the Protection of Cultural Property in the Event of Armed Conflict, plus its 2 protocols. The 1972 Biological Weapons Convention. The 1980 Conventional Weapons Convention and its 5 protocols. The 1993 Chemical Weapons Convention. The 1997 Ottawa Convention on Anti-Personnel Mines. The 20,000 Optional Protocol to the Convention on the Rights of Children on the Involvement of the Children in the Armed Conflict. Many provisions of international humanitarian law are now accepted as customary law, that is, as general rules by which all states are bound. When does international humanitarian law apply? International humanitarian law applies only to armed conflict. It does not cover internal tensions or disturbances such as isolated acts of violence. The law applies only once a conflict has begun, and then equally to all sides regardless of who started the war. What does international humanitarian law cover? International humanitarian law covers 2 areas. The protection of those who are not, or no longer, taking part in fighting. Restrictions on the means of warfare, in particular weapons and the methods of warfare, such as military tactics. What is protection? International humanitarian law protects those who do not take part in the fighting, such as civilians and the medical and religious military personnel. It also protects those who have ceased to take part, such as wounded, shipwrecked, and sick combatants, and prisoners of war. More specifically, it is forbidden to kill or wound an enemy who surrenders or is unable to fight. The sick and wounded must be collected and cared for by the party in whose the power they find themselves. Medical personnel, supplies, hospitals and ambulances must all be protected. There are also detailed rules. What restrictions are there on weapons and tactics? International humanitarian law prohibits all means and methods of warfare which fail to discriminate between those taking part in the fighting and those, such as civilians, who are not, the purpose being to protect the civilian population, individual civilians and civilian property. Cause superfluous injury or unnecessary suffering. Cause severe or long-term damage to the environment. Humanitarian law has therefore banned the use of many weapons, including exploding bullets, chemical and biological weapons, blinding laser weapons and anti-personnel mines. Is international humanitarian law actually complied with? Sadly, there are countless examples of violations of international humanitarian law. Increasingly, the victims of war are civilians. However, there are important cases where international humanitarian law has made a difference in protecting civilians, prisoners, the sick and the wounded, and in restricting the use of barbaric weapons. What should be done to implement the law? Measures must be taken to ensure respect for international humanitarian law. States have an obligation to teach its rules to their armed forces and the general public. They must prevent violations or punish them if these nevertheless occur. In particular, they must enact laws to punish the most serious violations of the Geneva Conventions and additional protocols, which are regarded as war crimes. The states must also pass laws protecting the Red Cross and Red Crescent emblems. Measures have also been taken at an international level. Tribunals have been created to punish acts committed in two recent conflicts, the former Yugoslavia and Rwanda. An international criminal court, with the responsibility of repressing inter alia war crimes, was created by the 1998 Rome Statute. Whether as individuals or through governments and various organizations, we can all make an important contribution to compliance with international humanitarian law. So this was a short intro to international humanitarian law, and if you want to know more about law, then subscribe to our channel and click the bell icon. Thank you for watching.